Shall we go?
Sansa Stark is my favorite character from the Game of Thrones TV show, and yes, I know that her storyline on the show isn't perfect. It is far from perfect, thanks to the showrunners who ruined the show, that the show ended so horribly, so disastrously. But I think, in the end, at least, Sansa still got the ending she deserved. My favorite scene of Sansa in the show was in season 5, at the night of her wedding to Ramsay Bolton. She was taking a bath, helped by Miranda, Ramsay's girlfriend, and Miranda tried to scare her by telling how mean and evil Ramsay was to his past girlfriends who bored him, who disappointed him. And Sansa, being such a badass, just stared at Miranda, and she said one of my most favorite lines in the show.
I'm Sansa Stark of Winterfell. This is my home, and you can't frighten me.
After the show ended, I started reading the books and watching videos and listening to podcasts of discussions about the books and the difference between the books and the show. And I realized that Sansa's storyline in the books is quite different from the show, and because of that, I see that her ending in the show and in the books might be very different.
Fine work as always, well done.
But at the beginning, I think book Sansa and show Sansa, they are quite the same. Both of them are not very likable. In fact, I think book Sansa is much more obnoxious, annoying, and even stupid. Maybe it's because in the books we can see how she thinks, how she acts, and why she acts a certain way. And after finished reading A Game of Thrones, I think I truly understand why many readers dislike her and even hate her.
I think Joffrey will like me. What if he thinks I'm ugly?
Then he is the stupidest prince that ever lived.
He's so handsome. When would we be married? Soon, or do we have to wait?
Hush now. Your father hasn't even said yes.
Why would he say no? I'd be queen someday. Please make father say yes.
Sansa.
Please, please. It's the only thing I ever wanted.
I think the main cause of why she was so hated and she made horrible decisions in the first book is because her mind wasn't in the real world. In the first book, it is explained that Sansa was obsessed with the songs and stories, the old fairy tales of Westeros. Those kind of fairy tales where good guys always win, the monsters, the bad guys always lose, and in the end, the princess marries the prince and they live happily ever after. The first thing she did wrong in the first book is her blind love to Joffrey. She was in love with him just because he was a prince. Since meeting Joffrey, all Sansa wanted was to get married to him and be queen and make babies for Joffrey. There's a line from the chapter Sansa 1 where her blind love to Joffrey is described very perfectly, I think. I'll read the line. Sansa did not really know Joffrey yet, but she was already in love with him. He was all she ever dreamed her prince should be. Tall and handsome and strong, with hair like gold. Later, still in the same chapter, Sansa and Joffrey were riding together on their horses when they ran into Arya and a butcher's boy named Micah. Arya and Micah were mock fighting with wooden swords, but Joffrey interrupted them. Joffrey then bullied Micah and even hurt him with lion's tooth, Joffrey's sword, which was made of real steel. And then, in order to protect her friend, Arya fought Joffrey. Joffrey then attacked Arya, who was only a 9-year-old at this time, with his sword, screaming dirty words, as described in the book. Fortunately, Nymeria saved Arya by biting Joffrey's hand. Then, Arya took Joffrey's sword, and Joffrey begged Arya not to hurt him, or he'll tell his mother. And can you guess what Sansa did after witnessing that event? She should have realized who Joffrey was. A bully, an evil one, a dangerous guy, a coward. But can you guess what she did? She told Arya off. She told Arya to leave Joffrey alone. She didn't care that Joffrey nearly killed Arya if not for Nymeria. She didn't care that Arya, her own sister, was in danger. She chose Joffrey, and this was the second mistake she made in the book. The third mistake is she ignored all the red flags just because he's a prince. As we know, if you have watched the show or read the book, after this event, Arya, Micah, and Nymeria ran off. After Micah had been found, he was brutally killed. And after Arya had been found, she was brought to the king and the queen, witnessed by Joffrey, and later Ned Stark and Sansa. There, Joffrey lied to everyone by saying that Arya and Micah were the ones who tried to attack him first, and Nymeria tried to rip his arm off. And when Sansa was called to tell everyone what had actually happened, she lied by saying that everything went so fast and she didn't remember it at all. Joffrey wanted Nymeria to be punished, but since Nymeria ran off and nowhere to be found, and the only direwolf in that camp was Lady, it was Lady that had to die in place of Nymeria. Lady, her own direwolf, which Sansa loved very much, was dead because of Joffrey, but Sansa really didn't blame Joffrey at all. In the later chapters, whenever she remembered how Lady died, she blamed Arya and made excuses for Joffrey's wrongdoings. She didn't realize how cruel Joffrey was, and she still chose to love him because he was a prince. How foolish of you, Sansa. And that brings us to her fourth mistake, an even bigger mistake than the previous ones. In the later chapters, after they had stayed at King's Landing for a while and Eddard Stark sensed danger, he planned to send Arya, Sansa, and their household back home to Winterfell by ship. But Sansa didn't want to leave because of her love to Joffrey. So she made this fourth mistake by telling Cersei Lannister of her father's plan, and that resulted in a disaster, a manslaughter, a mass killing of the Stark household. Even Septa Morden and Vane Poole, who cannot swing a sword, were killed by the Lannisters, and Arya had to run off to save herself. If Sansa hadn't been so stupid, she, Arya, and the Stark household would have been safe in the ship heading back to Winterfell, their home. And I really, really hated Sansa when I realized she did this in the book, because in the show, she was captured by the Lannisters and there was no mention of her telling Cersei about Ned's plan to leave King's Landing. And then she made the fifth mistake. She still believed in Joffrey, even after Ned was imprisoned and accused of being a traitor. She didn't realize how cruel and evil and horrible Joffrey was until she witnessed herself with her own eyes how Joffrey, who promised her to give her father mercy, told Eileen Payne to cut Ned Stark's head off.
Stop it! Stop!
Her father's death by Joffrey's command was the wake-up call for Sansa. Afterwards, Sansa stayed in her room and she won't eat, she won't take a bath for days. And then Joffrey came to her room and commanded her to dress up and attend the first court he held after being named king. After all that had happened, this time Sansa knew that she didn't want to marry him. And then Joffrey said that chopping off Ned Stark's head was a merciful act because if Ned Stark hadn't been Sansa's father, Joffrey would have had him torn or flayed. And now I'm going to read how Sansa responded to that. This is one of my favorite lines from the book. Sansa stared at him, seeing him for the first time. He was wearing a padded crimson doublet, patterned with lions, and a cloth of gold cape with a high collar that framed his face. She wondered how she could ever have thought him handsome. His lips were as soft and red as the worms you found after rain, and his eyes were vain and cruel. "I hate you," she whispered. And then she attended the court, and she realized that everybody was treating her differently because now she was labeled as a daughter of a traitor. And here she finally realized that life is different than the songs. I'm going to read how she realized that. Frog-faced Lord Selyn sat at the end of the council table, wearing a black velvet doublet and a shiny cloth of gold cape, nodding with approval every time the king pronounced a sentence. Sansa stared hard at his ugly face, remembering how he had thrown down her father for Sir Eiling to behead, wishing she could hurt him, wishing that some hero would throw him down and cut off his head. But a voice inside her whispered, "There are no heroes." And she remembered what Lord Peter had said to her, here in this very hall. "Life is not a song, sweeting," he told her. "You may learn that one day to your sorrow." In life, the monsters win, she told herself. And now it was the hound's voice she heard, a cold rasp, metal on stone. "Save yourself some pain, girl, and give him what he wants." Okay, after finishing all Sansa chapters in the first book, I'm sorry for her because she had to lose her family members. She had to lose her father, and her sister is nowhere to be found, and she was very far away from the rest of her family. But at least she had gotten smarter, much smarter than before. And now I can't wait to read the next books to find out what happened to Sansa and how her story unfolds in the books. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope I can make better videos in the future. Bye!